Hello, this is Sid and Millie Chats. I'm Sid,
I'm Millie.
and we invite you to be a fly on our wall.
Okay.
So today we just finished watching the Manchester United versus Brighton game at
Mm-hmm.
home at Old Trafford.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna do something a little different. We're gonna talk about both of the games that happened this week. So the game versus
Southampton.
Southampton earlier in the week, as well as this game today against Brighton.
Yeah.
So do you want to start with the Southampton game, or do you want to do kind of an overall like?
Maybe we can talk about both. Like,
Okay.
maybe we'll just like generally talk about Southampton a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
because it kind of does feed in like to today's performance as well.
Right.
So I think it's like important to say that like the Southampton game, United was really saved by like moments of brilliance by Ahmad. Xerxes came on as a sub late in the second half of that game, and he really like unlocked United's attack against Southampton, who is last place in the Premier League, 20th place. But for I guess so, Ahmad in the last 10 minutes came through, had a brilliant 10 minutes,
Yeah.
unlocked the defense, scored multiple goals. It was amazing. It was phenomenal to get the 3 points.
Yeah.
Um,
Hats off.
yeah, hats off to Ahmad for like taking the last 10 minutes into his own hands.
Absolutely.
And Ericsson obviously had a beautiful assist. That was like a worldy assist that we saw. So that was really cool as well. But I think if we took out the last 10 minutes of that Southampton match and we looked at that game as the 80 minutes beforehand, it was a really poor match. It was a really poor game of football from United.
What were some of those things that you noticed that they were doing poorly?
Well, first, our attack just is so methodical. It's so slow. So when we're building into the attack, we have the ball, we have possession, we'll be moving the ball relatively quickly and moving their defense, and then someone will turn around and play the safe option and put their foot on the ball and maintain possession, which is fine. Like we also want to be like a possession team at some points, but I feel like there's just not enough emphasis on like attacking the opponents and like trying to score goals. I think against Southampton in the first half of that game, I don't even know if United had a shot on target.
Okay. Wow.
Had shots, but shot on target, I don't even think so. And if there was one, there was only a singular one.
Okay.
And then for majority of the second half, it was basically the same thing. I mean, United were failing to create real cut chances, and Southampton for a lot of the game was actually the better team.
Wow.
Which again, they're 20th.
Right.
place.
So lower on the table.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the scoreline really didn't show like the true story of the game.
Right.
And so it wasn't, again, very thankful for the 3 points. Ahmad was brilliant.
Yeah.
Xerxes,
And Onana with some of his saves.
Yeah, Onana. The game would have been completely different without Onana's saves. So obviously we'll get into today's game. But at the end of the day, Onana kept the team alive against Southampton, and they don't get that three points without Onana. Xerxes had a big role in that, and then obviously Ahmad scored his first Premier League hat trick, which was massive to get the 3 points in that, but it really didn't tell the whole story of the game. And so for large parts of that game, United was hanging on.
I feel like that's something that we've talked about in past games too. It's like a pattern for sure, where like they'll come through with a win right at the end, but if you look at the first like majority of the game, you're not seeing any I guess like production from the team.
100%. And production is a good word to use, because like that is what's lacking, production. I mean, moving away from Southampton into today, like we had one shot on target, and
it was the penalty. So
one shot on target in 90 minutes of football from Manchester United was a penalty kick. It doesn't even sound right saying it out loud. A penalty kick was our only shot on target at Old Trafford.
Kind of.
So
bit embarrassing.
So I guess let's transition into today, into the Brighton game.
Yes. Yeah. What were your initial kind of takeaways? Do you want to go like half by half, or do you want to just go into the whole thing?
I mean, we could probably summarize basically the whole game. I mean,
Yeah.
there wasn't anything in the first half. I mean, both halves were bang average from the team. I mean, there wasn't anything created in the first half. Yes, we've had shots, kind of wild shots, 8 shots, but again, only one on target. So
Yeah.
they're not like we're not truly creating anything. And then how many times is United going to allow other teams to sit us back in our own
Right.
half? I mean, they've broken. So again, the high press has been successful. We saw the high press late in the game against Southampton. It did end up working for Ahmad, pressing the guys higher up and winning the ball and creating opportunities straight from that. But what is the second phase of pressure? So once they break past the initial press and we've now done the work and gotten all 11 guys behind the ball, which the team has done better, we can all admit that. Everybody gets behind the ball. But once we get into that defensive shape, the opposing team, Brighton, today had the ball at the mid halfway point with their center backs. And their defensive midfielders halfway down the half were receiving the ball and turning with no pressure on them.
Yeah.
So it's just like, why do we need to sit all 11 players around our 18-yard box? It's just too far back in our own half to win the ball. Like, we have to, as a unit, the United team has to step up. Like, the wingbacks have to get higher. They have to trust that they can win their one-on-one battles against those outside guys. The 3 in the middle have to be confident that they'll win the balls in the air and also be able to cover their wingbacks.
Right.
But right now we're like collapsing onto ourselves, creating that back flat 5, which makes it almost impossible to break forward.
Right.
Because when we win the ball, we're winning the ball at the top of our 18 or in our 18.
And then have to sprint the length of the field to go.
Exactly.
Try and like.
To create anything.
Yeah.
And so it's too far back defensively. So when we win the ball, we're not able to create those opportunities. And then when we are in those transitional moments, how many times when we have momentum, when we're catching them on the break, did our guys put their foot on the ball and turn back?
Right.
And play safe?
Yeah, go back towards Onana.
We go back to Maguire, then we go back to Onana. And it's just like, okay, we've just lost the attacking momentum that we were rolling with, that we were running with. We've lost that now. And then again, we get into the passing formation, the passing shape, but we don't really create anything from it. Right.
Yeah. And I guess, like, in your opinion, Millie, is this more reflection on the players or the manager?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's kind of where it gets tricky. I mean, I mean, it's probably a mixture of both, but at the end of the day, like, we know that having a right-footed player playing as a left wing back is not going to work. We know that it doesn't fit well in the system. So every time Dalot gets selected as the left wing back, we're not setting Dalot up for success.
Right.
We know he'll work hard. We know he'll try his best, but we're not setting him up for success, putting him in a position where he's going to be forced to use his weaker left foot or to come inside, like onto his right foot. So not setting him up for success there. And then again, like with our back four, Brighton's first goal was just one direct ball over the top, one slipped pass and a tap in. Right. 3 passes broke our entire team down. So we talked about it a little bit during the game, but how does nobody recognize, hey, we don't have pressure on the ball in this moment. The line can't be this high at this moment because there's no pressure on the ball.
Right.
The center back has done the look down and look up. He's done the classic signal that I'm about to ping this ball, and nobody's clued in on it. And the back line was completely flat. And when you have a flat line, it allows for a pacey winger or a pacey forward. Hey, buddy, for a pacey forward to get in behind,
take advantage of it
exactly
easily. Yeah.
And in that moment, had one of the back 3, any of the 3 recognized that, or had it been shouted from Onana, shouted from the bench, shouted from anywhere, if somebody drops off a few yards, recognizing that there's no pressure on the ball, it's an easy header.
Yeah.
Right? It's an easy header away. But again, because our defensive shape, we're so focused on just getting back into a shape instead of realizing in that moment, there's no pressure on the ball. And this is a player, they had broken that first line of pressure, and then we're trying to get back into that shape.
Right.
And it's a transitional moment, and we're almost forgetting that the game is still going on.
Yeah, focusing too much on like the technicalities of it than
Right.
like just playing.
Yeah,
and like knowing the game and trusting your knowledge
exactly
in like the game.
100%. And so like it's important like for the back three of that five to make sure that one, the back three, they can never be flat. The three of them, someone always has to be providing depth of the back three to make sure that balls like that cannot happen. And so not only can those three not be flat, but certainly the black five can't be flat.
Yeah.
Not five, and definitely not four of them. They can't be flat at the same time. Someone has to be on top of the depth of the line and make sure that they are commanding that someone is dropping off, or that they are taking the responsibility and dropping off, so that these wingers aren't just able to outrun everybody and play one simple pass.
Yeah.
It was just route one football that beat us today. And that was just simple. I mean, the replay of the defender was the guy who pinged the ball in behind. All of the signs were there. He did all of it. Had no pressure on the ball, took the touch out of in like a good yard and a half in front of him, looked down at the ball, checked where his forwards, tracked where his forwards were, and put his head down in the universal signs that he's pinging a long ball. And no one on our squad picked it up to know that the runner was going to be dangerous.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's a bit of a mixture of like playing players in weak positions and also just like
I mean the structure. Yeah, maybe the structure. I don't know. I just feel like something right now has to be done with like, yes, the press higher up the field is good when it works, but what's the plan if they get through that, right? I mean, Brighton have won maybe one of their last 6 Premier League games. Southampton are 20th in the league. So it's not like the two teams in the last 2 games we've played have been top of the level teams like Liverpool and Arsenal from our games before. But against now lower teams in the table, it's like now United isn't sure where we want to press or where our press line starts or how to press again after they break through the first line of pressure. And that second line of pressure is just as important as the first one. I would honestly argue that you're better off not putting that first line of pressure in if that means you're not going to be able to do the second phase of pressure. Because I guess like to simplify it, why sprint at the keeper or the center back in their half high up the pitch, right? Those are pretty low percentage. Like wins.
That makes sense, yeah.
But when they do work, obviously Ahmad has tap-ins.
Yeah.
But today, like that, it didn't work at all.
Didn't happen,
so at some point in the game, in the half, do we recognize, okay, our high press isn't working on this team. So maybe we just let them have that. And then apply pressure at a later stage.
Your energy for like
So we're not sprinting as far back, because how many times did they have a goal kick and we're having our guys lined around the 18-yard box sprinting at them off their goal kick, but then they've played out of it. And now all of our guys who are just pressing at the 18 are now hightailing it 60 yards back to now get back into defensive shape. That's the reason they don't have energy to apply pressure again when Brighton brings the ball up to midfield. That's the reason why. Because they've just had to hightail it back so far down the pitch.
And then, oh my gosh,
and so I just think that the defensive line in the second phase of defense, when we are back in our own half, it's too far back. Like we've got to get higher up in our own defensive half and apply pressure at probably midfield is probably the safest bet. If you've got all 11 guys behind the ball at midfield and their center backs have the ball, you can afford to make sure we're matched up for any pass that's about to get received. In my opinion, Xerxes can angle it and start forcing the center back in one direction, right? And then we close the field off again in another half. So that is the type of way you would want to approach a team pressure who has possession in your defending in your own half, especially when you're at Old Trafford. There has to be some intensity, some willingness to win the ball back.
100%.
So as soon as they cross halfway, we should be back on them. We need to get the ball.
It kind of almost seems like there's like a miscommunication or some like
Mm,
something's like lost in translation between like
mm,
what, I don't know. We don't
yeah.
really know what's happening
Yeah, I
between
mean,
like the
yeah,
players and the manager, and
there's no
so
telling what's going on. But I
yeah,
mean, one thing that's clear as day is that it's not working right now. I
yeah,
mean, we got bailed out by Ahmad against Southampton. Today, we didn't get bailed out. So today it was just another bang average performance. Now, some people did play pretty decent. Like, I think Xerxes played well.
hmm,
I think he, as the nine, really helps United receive the ball and be able to play more, because he does really well holding up the ball and beating that first guy.
right,
So I think Xerxes did well, but I think Ahmad did well. He created the very few attacking opportunities we had. Basically,
hmm,
everything was coming from Ahmad's side, on the right side. So those would probably be the two guys. I think Delit had some good
okay,
clearances. I think Maguire had some good clearances. I think Ugarte won some important balls. But I think overall, as a team, everybody, it wasn't good enough.
yeah, it was
Um,
pretty just like average.
yeah, I mean, all in all, pretty average. And I mean, fair play to Brighton. They took advantage of it. They were on top of it.
Hmm,
And it is a very clear difference when a team is creating like clear opportunities to
right,
score versus a team that's creating half chances. United created half chances. Like, okay, maybe we could have done better,
hmm,
but Brighton's goals were pretty well deserved goals, right? I mean, like they weren't like anything spectacular, but at the end of the day, it's a reflection of United's poor defending, poor organization,
yeah,
and kind of like lack of willingness to win the ball. Maybe like some desire as
yeah.
well. I mean, they're playing at Old Trafford.
I know, yeah, you should have that like extra bit of pride almost going into the
Yeah.
game.
Like as far as like I'm concerned, like any team that has possession of the ball that's not United, it should almost be like a criminal offense if you're at Old Trafford. Like
Yeah,
it should all like they should want the ball back. Like you need the ball to be dangerous. So it's just
100%.
like I don't understand what we're gaining by like letting teams possess around us in our own half. Again,
Right.
like the possession is fine, but we've got to have some end product at
Yeah,
the end
like
of
what are
it.
we doing with the possession?
Yeah.
It's like that's great, cool stat, but what did you
Right.
do with
Right. And I
it?
mean, when we looked at the stats, they weren't too far apart. I mean,
Mm-mm. It was like
Brighton had,
49% United
yeah,
or something.
exactly.
Yeah.
Brighton had just as much possession. They had just as many passes, but they actually created
More
more
opportunities
opportunities to
and took
score.
more shots on target.
Exactly. And so, yeah, so it was, I guess, another back-to-back underwhelming matches for United. The transfer window is open. There's a lot of kind of rumors
Speculation of like what's
circulating,
happening. Yeah.
about what could happen, what will happen. But I think at the end of the day, like United, both the fans, manager, like the club, have to be realistic about the position we're in.
Yeah.
Um, United can't go like City somehow is allowed to do because the laws don't apply to them. They went and
Right.
dropped 80, 90 million euros during the transfer market. Somehow, again, City just does whatever they want,
Of course.
and no one does anything. But United don't have the money to go and do that. So it's unrealistic to think we're going to see 4, 5, 6 players come in. I mean,
Yeah,
it never
please.
happens
Mm.
in any transfer window, especially not with the price tag that gets latched on to players when they know they're coming to United.
Right.
Which it's not obviously the player's fault. It's
Right.
the
It's the
club's
club.
taking advantage of like the financial situation, but it's just the reality of the world we live in now. So like thinking that United is going to get a bunch of bargain deals to bring 8 new players through the door with no outgoings, it's impossible.
Yeah.
So for a large part, like how can we get the best out of the group we have? How do we set up the group that United has now
Hmm.
for the best success? And I think that in the short term, that is the reality of what United needs to do.
Yeah.
The Europa League, sure, like we're in the top half of that division. So next week there will be a little bit more room, like wiggle room, I guess, in the midweek game,
Okay.
as far as like the result isn't as impending. But I think for every Premier League game at this point, until we can get back into the top half of the table, it should just be about how can we get the win.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't need to be pretty. It doesn't need to fit a perfect system. We just need to win games at this point. Like that's what Ruben said when he first came in. you got to win to buy time,
Right.
and to buy time to be able to build the system you want. We got to win.
Wow, is that what he said when he first came
He
in?
said
And
you've got to
then
win to buy time.
switched to we're gonna need to struggle.
Yeah.
Was there like a
Yeah.
switch over?
Well, I
Or
mean, maybe, I mean, again, I think a little bit of the reality set in
yeah,
once, it's one thing to say those things before you get the job, but then once you
right,
get there, what does it look like once you're actually in the room making those decisions with the players? Obviously, we've sidelined one of our best attacking
yeah,
players. So no need to get too deep into that, but we're sidelining some of our best attacking players, and we're also not scoring goals. The
right.
team isn't fully adjusting to the system. We don't have any out and out wingbacks to fit into a wingback system, yet we're locked in on a wingback system. So there are a lot of things that aren't necessarily working in United's favor right
Yeah,
now. And we kind of hoped that the Liverpool and Arsenal games would be like a little swing of the pendulum.
right. Like give them some momentum. But
Right.
it's like they come out and show out during those games, but then it's like you come to a game where they should be winning
Yeah.
realistically,
Yeah.
and they struggle.
Yeah.
So it's like they perform when they really absolutely need to.
Right.
But
Especially
then
against those big teams.
when they have like space to actually be like have their own almost personality as a team without being
Right.
like frantic trying to just like win the game,
Mm-hmm.
when they have to like actually try and work in the system,
Yeah.
then
100%.
it seems like that's when they're really struggling.
Exactly. And like you said, like it's a great point that you bring up, like without the emotional heightenedness from like those big games and big FA Cup, like without that and getting into the kind of fist fight battles
Right.
and the emotions that kind of pull you through those games. Like you said, like how do you get through your week in and week out games? Those like you have to show up for class. You have to show up and get this done.
Right.
And yeah, they just still aren't doing that. And again, like there's not going to be a lot of like where we can say like, oh, like this is Ten Hag's.
Yeah, please. He's gone.
He's been gone for months now. So like, I can't adhere to that anymore.
No.
Like, again, like United has to be better, and we have to see them like not only playing better but getting results. 100%. And those are two things that we just haven't seen. Like the system isn't very like it's not showing itself the way we would expect. And so yeah, I guess this is still the suffering time period that we're in.
Yeah.
So just two pretty underwhelming games.
Yeah. So yeah, those were our thoughts.
So those were our thoughts on Manchester United's game today. That was against Brighton, the 3-1 loss at home at Old Trafford. But also our thoughts on the Southampton game, which was a little bit better, got a win. So a mod hat trick, which was super exciting.
Absolutely.
So the Southampton game was a little bit of a better reflection, a little bit more of a high note, but yeah, so that was kind of a weekly recap of United. We'll see how they're looking next week in the Europa League and hope that the Premier League form will improve a little bit. And yeah, so if you made it this far,
thanks for tuning in.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye. We'll get there. We'll recover.
Thanks for watching.